I think the most important question I get is sort of what makes this brand so different to any other brand that's on the market. And for me, it's who founded and who created RéVive, and that is Dr. Gregory Bays Brown from Louisville, Kentucky. And as a plastic surgeon, they address skin very differently than a dermatologist or a doctor does. A dermatologist or a doctor looks at skin as a flat surface. They really don't have to address facial contouring or volume because they don't cut into the skin. Before he went into surgical practice, Dr. Brown decided that the only way that he would ever understand the skin and the way the skin functioned was to work with very destroyed tissue. He worked on patients where 80% of their bodies were third-degree burns. The technology at the time was to harvest the existing, the good tissue, the 20% that was left, to harvest it and then do the graft on the burn victim. But very few patients survived because you would have to wait for this tissue to grow, then do the harvest. So for Dr. Brown, it became crucial on how do we speed up this process? How else can we do this? And so what he pioneered was, and I'll use a bad example, but let's say anyone in London ended up in a situation like this, what they would do is they would send Dr. Brown a piece of skin about the size of a postage stamp. And what he would do is in a Petri dish, he would grow a sheet of skin. And it would take a month to grow it. And what they would do is they would literally just roll the skin up and they would FedEx it to London. And the doctors here would take this web-looking skin and they would use it on the burn victim as a graft. But it still took a month. And so for Dr. Brown, it was sort of, how do we speed up even that process? And so there were two scientists in the 60s that identified a naturally occurring protein in your body. The scientists were looking at why, if you damage rat tissue, why do the rats actually lick their wounds? And the scientists wanted to know why. And they actually realized that at the back of salivary glands, animals secrete a protein that tells their skin tissue to heal. So that's why they lick their wounds. They want to get the protein onto their wounds. We call these proteins growth factors. That speeds up their healing process. And modern scientists now has realized that we have 32 of these growth factors in our body. In the 60s, they knew that the science existed in the body, but the problem is it's this strand of DNA, this protein, is only a 4-helix strand of DNA. It's very small. So how do you extract enough of the protein itself to be able to do trial studies? But nothing was done until 1986. And it was a little startup company in San Francisco in the Bay Area. In their garage, for the first time, they were going to produce what we call recombinant DNA. And it mimics the exact protein that's in your body. So Dr. Brown said, okay, let me do your trial studies. Let's see what would happen if we could, here he is producing these sheets of skin. Let's see what would happen if we influenced the skin tissue. So Dr. Brown goes back to Louisville, Kentucky, puts the epidermal growth factor in his solution, and instead of taking 1 month to grow the sheets of skin, it now took 4 to 5 days. So it was able to speed up that renewal process almost 4 times faster than normal. And when they looked at the skin tissue itself, it was this very healthy looking skin tissue. So when Dr. Brown published his results in the New England Journal of Medicine, there was so much focus on epidermal growth factor as this ability to speed up wounded, destroyed tissue. In fact, the US government has given him a grant to help with burn victims coming back from Desert Storm, really destroyed and wounded tissue. So the scientists who identified the growth factor in the 60s actually won a Nobel Prize for their work on epidermal growth factor. So when we talk about RéVive, you'll hear that it's Nobel Prize winning technology, but it really comes about from the research that was involved in actually finding the benefits of this protein. So Dr. Brown now, huge accolades, a lot of stuff going on, goes back to his surgical practice, which is his love. He loves surgery, but he realizes that there's no way that you can aesthetically create a youthful result using a scalpel. You can't. You can pull back the skin and iron it, but the reality is, one, you are still stuck with your age skin, which whatever your age is, isn't necessarily youthful. And second of all, you actually replace what is youth with scar tissue. So to me, the best definition of what is youth would be that lovely 3 or 4-year-old, that toddler that we see. And the first reaction, our instinct, is to just grab those cheeks because they're so fluid-filled, there's so much spongy, fibrous tissue that we just want to grab those cheeks. That is youth. And unfortunately, when you go through a surgical procedure like a facelift, you actually replace what is youth, that spongy, fibrous tissue, with scar tissue. The big problem is when we are 21 years old, we turn our skin over every 21 days. By the time you get into your 40s and 50s, you have not turned your skin over in probably 6 to 8 weeks. And so what tends to happen is there's this barrier of dead skin. So imagine if we could theoretically get this growth factor, this messaging system back into your skin, that would only achieve youth. We'd be putting back the clock. So Dr. Brown talks to the guy he does all his research with, his very good friend. He says, let's try and find a delivery system. Let's get this growth factor into the skin. And his best friend actually said, good luck, but there is no way in the world that you are ever going to be able to find a delivery system that'll get this growth factor into the skin. And so he actually said, I'm retiring, I'm moving to Florence. And he did. And 6 years later, Dr. Brown called him in Florence and he said, come home, I've done it. And that was the birth of RéVive. And it was actually this one product called Moisturizing Renewal. It's an interesting product. It's 12 years old and it's still our #1 selling SKU in RéVive. I believe that it's the most dramatic results in a very short period of time. I believe that if you use this product tonight, tomorrow morning you see a visible difference. Dr. Brown always says to me, give it 4 days, but I really do believe that the very next morning you see a difference. And it actually sits in an 8% glycolic. And I would say to Dr. Brown, why would you put something so healing into an acid, a fruit acid? But remember, if we're not turning skin over, because now we're getting into our 40s and 50s, we have this barrier of dead skin. And so what the glycolic does is it breaks up the bonds that hold dead skin together and it sloughs the dead skin away. And so when you use Moisturizing Renewal, you might wake up in the morning and there might be dead skin on your pillow, which is kind of revolting, but it's such a great thing because we want to remove the barrier of dead skin so that we can influence your skin tissue with this growth factor and turn skin over almost 4 times faster than normal. So that's sort of where we started. We can now, with our Pro Magnifique product we came out with 2 years ago, we can actually produce brand new baby skin tissue where no one on the cosmetic floor has ever achieved that in any form of treatment, where we don't just optimize your skin tissue, which we do with RéVive, we can actually recruit more of the mother cells that produce skin. We call these mother cells basal membrane cells, and what they are responsible for are the production of skin. So every 21 days or 4 months, wherever you're at, it produces new skin tissue. And we are able to, with our Pro Magnifique, actually recruit more of them so that the density of your skin is increased. So it looks like baby skin on an adult. And no one has been able to achieve that. So as RéVive, we genuinely believe that we are the cutting edge of skincare. There is nothing that could possibly scientifically do more for your skin and yet be as natural as you. People think that animal or botanical-based products are very natural, but you're not a plant and you're not an animal. It's very simple. So the human receptor skin cell sites on that skin cell itself are waiting for a human protein to connect to be able to produce that change. So that is why RéVive is so effective. It works with your body's messaging system. So that is why we believe that RéVive is the most technologically advanced skincare on the planet.